Blood Money episode 21 with Austin Steinbart, and we discuss what is Q Intel Pro. Hi Austin, how you doing?
Hey Vem, I'm doing good. How about you?
Good. I saw you guys scrambling there to get ready and stuff. Is everything cool, or
we were having a few technical issues, but we're good.
We're good to go. Okay, awesome. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How about you? See that you guys got
Great.
This exciting new collective starting out there in Vegas.
Yeah, with Studio 17, and America Happens, we're launching a new platform with Studio 17 producing all the content. And on that tip, a shout out to Travis and Andrea for helping us put this together. Travis, helped us put these wonderful graphics together. So shout out to those guys. And
yep, Travis is the man.
Yeah, so I want to dive into it here with Austin. Let's kind of start off with, the mainstream media says a whole bunch of crap, and let's talk a little bit about that. They say a whole bunch of things about you. I want you to explain to the folks out there how you see yourself in the fight for freedom.
Well, there, as you said, there's a lot of rumors out there about me. Essentially, I am trying to quarterback or play quartermaster for a regime change operation that we're trying to make happen in the United States. And what do I mean by regime change? I don't mean just business as usual. I don't mean just try to elect a few people and have them go in there and get captured. I mean bypass these rigged elections, as you guys experience out there in Vegas, as we experience here in Arizona, and say blockchain election and have everybody vote to the tune of like 75% to put this country into bankruptcy, put this corporation, I should say, into bankruptcy, to pretty much fire our entire government and update our constitution and start a new country with a fresh start, with a fresh flag.
Yeah, I noticed you have the peace flag back there. We'll talk about that in a sec. But what is the core, principles of where you see the biggest problems that we have that kind of filter themselves into all the corruption, frankly, in all branches of our government right now?
I see us being captured by the British Empire as our biggest issue. So a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of the ruthless banking oligarchs that started the Federal Reserve worked for the British Empire. DC itself is this city-state where they don't have to follow the Constitution in the same way as they would as if they were a state. And that is essentially a carbon copy of this thing called the City of London. So the City of London is a medieval banking enclave within the actual City of London where the normal rules of Parliament don't apply. And that's where the bar is, like the international bar, where all the other bars, like the legal thing, franchise their procedures from. That's where the Bank of England is. And the Bank of England uses the fact that they have this special privileges granted by the city-state of London to essentially backstop all of the offshore banking in the world. So if you're a rich person and you want to go put your money in some sketchy place like the Cayman Islands, what makes you confident that that bank isn't just going to fold and you're going to lose all your money? The thing that makes you confident is it's backstopped by the Central Bank of England, because the Central Bank of England doesn't have to follow the same rules as the country of England or the country of the UK. So the carbon copy of the City of London in DC, the capturing of our banking system, and then in the 40s, the capturing of our intelligence services. So as the World War II was breaking out, the MI6, the Secret Intelligence Service, came over here and helped us build OSS, which is the precursor to the CIA, from the ground up. And they essentially taught them everything they know. They said, hire these people, do things this way, so on and so forth. And, oh, by the way, we're going to make this little deal with you. We've been running a lot of these mafias in the United States. And as you know, they made the deals with the mafias to protect the docks for intelligence services. But so they said, we're going to make this deal for you. And essentially, when you need to order something that is illegal by United States standards, or you need to get rid of somebody that you guys can't legally do that, then you can call us up and you can use the authority of the Crown to be taking care of that. And if it goes to the
because it's
authority
in
of the
a
crown,
because it's in a different jurisdiction, and hence there becomes jurisdictional issues. Is that the reason
oh
why
well, no. In
it's
the
sort of
crown's case, the crown just by law doesn't have to follow any rules. The crown can never be prosecuted, right? If you're a royal, like if you're King Charles right now, you could go just murder 100 people in the street, and there's nothing they could do to prosecute you. So that legal immunity is one thing. The fact that the crown is the formal commander in chief of not just the British military and intelligence services, but of the Canadian ones, of the Australian ones, of the New Zealand ones, of the Belizean ones, of the Jamaican ones, right? So they have all of these military and intelligence assets at their disposal. They can never be prosecuted no matter what they do. And anything that they do order by law, according to this monarchy thing, can be kept secret forever. So it's quite a doozy there. But they made deals with the CIA and with D5, which is the covert counterintelligence wing of the FBI, to where if they need something handled in the United States and they don't have the legal authority to go scratch that itch, they can just run it through the crown, and the crown can handle that for them.
Could you explain? You gave me some practical examples of that. I think you were referencing the JFK assassination. Could you explain to the viewer what that means practically in terms of an operation like the JFK assassination?
Yeah, so it means that if the CIA and certain elements of the military want to get rid of JFK, want to say, oh, he's a communist threat, or whatever BS pretext that they're trying to use to get rid of him, that they can go to the crown and they can get the crown to order that and get MI6 to facilitate that. And then it's not illegal and it can be kept secret forever. So if you've noticed in the justification, in the BS justifications that they've gotten over and over and over again for not declassifying the JFK documents, what does it say? It says it would cause identifiable harm to the law enforcement, military intelligence, and the conduct of foreign relations. Key kicker there. So essentially they could label this classification because they could say, oh, if people ever found out that this was, the Brits helping us do this, then that would irreparably harm our relationship with the crown and with our closest ally. And so the priority of keeping that secret to maintain this ally, a good relation with this ally, outweighs any public interest in disclosure. And they did that with the Vegas thing too. That was on the part of the Saudis.
October 1st, 2017.
Yep. We'll get into that in a bit. But essentially, so I listened to this thing with Roger Stone the other night, and he was talking about, all the various players that had bones to pick with JFK, from the bankers to the intelligence services to the mafia and all this stuff. And in his calculation, the nexus between all those points was LBJ. And LBJ, was a savvy guy, but he didn't have the pull like that. He didn't have the resources to be able to make that happen unless he had a massive, like the world's most massive and oldest intelligence service behind him. Right? So that's the real nexus, and LBJ is just the beneficiary.
Yeah, because the Roger Stone's book about the man who killed Kennedy's, he points a finger at LBJ as being pretty much the necessary fulcrum to all of the assassination plans. I mean, you don't agree with that assessment?
I don't agree that he was the one that had the pull to make it happen against the president. And I think later on, he demonstrated this willingness to use foreign intelligence services to achieve his ends on the USS Liberty. So that was a situation where they were trying to make stuff happen in the Middle East, and they got the Israelis to attack an American signals intelligence ship to kind of cut that off. So I think LBJ demonstrated later on that he knows exactly how that works, of getting foreign intelligence services to scratch an itch on your back for you. And so I don't necessarily think it's wrong that he was intricately involved, that he was, definitely wanting that to happen. He had that one quote, what was it, during the election, that was like, oh, they're like, why would you be his vice president? He's like, oh, well, it's just a heartbeat away from the presidency.
Yeah.
Right. So
and Nixon pretty much said that, he, in not so many upfront words, but definitely hinted at him believing that LBJ was willing to kill a president, I think was his quote.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't doubt that he was ruthless enough to want to kill the president and to try to set that in motion. I just contest that he had the resources and the pull to be able to make it happen at that level.
So you think in that whatever's left with the JFK files, I think like 3% of the documents or whatever. You think within that there's evidence that there was foreign involvement with MI6?
I do. I
Wow.
do.
Wow.
And I
So
think
let
that's
that,
one of the things that is the lever they're using to keep it so secret for so long.
gotcha.
And yeah, so I use the finders as my little lever there, the one where the CIA, right? Even if they do terrible things themselves, that's allowed to come out, right? So the finders was that CIA child kidnapping ring, and they would steal these kids from tunnels out of preschools, and they would lock them in cages and do these crazy satanic rituals on them to traumatize them enough so that they would be docile and not run away. So I think based on the finders, right, they are willing to admit that the CIA was involved in some of the worst things imaginable. And I think this JFK stuff, at least how they view it, is considerably worse.
And so that gets us into the QIntel Pro website. Am I saying the website right? Is QIntel.pro?
Yep, QIntel Pro. COINTELPRO is what the FBI does to us on political campaigns and on YouTube videos. And QIntel Pro is what we do to them right back.
Is this URL down here correct? QIntel.pro?
That is correct.
Awesome. So, yeah, that gets us into that whole conversation with what you guys are doing with QIntel Pro. Essentially, the way I explain our conversations is whenever somebody gets to a point where they realize that our government is utterly corrupted and there's things happening that are way beyond our imagination, I think that's where they run into people like you, Austin, when they're searching and they're at that level. So tell us a little bit about what you've done with this QIntel Pro website.
So this QIntel Pro website is designed to be the visually appealing SparkNotes version of a lot of the topics all of us talk about in the various truth communities here. And it's designed for the TikTok world, for all the crowd with TikTok braids, so that kind of if you're just skimming through and you're looking at pictures, reading headlines, you can kind of digest what is the big picture of what we're saying here. Because I think there's a lot of super smart people out there that are incredibly well researched on a lot of these topics. And I think that as the truth community, we get so much shit for, being called conspiracy theorists that a lot of people, they like to just download, right? They like to demonstrate their knowledge and show that like, no, this is right. And they write up these huge, long, very granular pieces, and they do these shows that are super duper long. And I think if we want to get a more mainstream audience on board, that's what I'm trying to do here, is we got to back up and give them just the basics. And so we're hoping that with this site, it's not just the stories, it's laced with a bunch of WikiLeaks and a bunch of other various documents that have come out over the years.
You're showing receipts.
Absolutely.
You're not just throwing theories out there.
Yep, but I'm trying to give just a little clip of the receipt. Obviously, for people who care, they can go look it up on WikiLeaks and see the full exchanges, the full sets of documents of what I'm talking about. But I'm trying to give just a little bit enough of a snippet to say, like, hey, this is a real thing that we're talking about. This really happened. This is really how it is. And so that way we can get through to a lot more people that we haven't been able to reach in the past. And so I'm hoping that people like you guys over here, at Blood Money and at America Happens Network, and just throughout the truth community, I'm hoping that this QIntel Pro site can be kind of like a gateway drug into the truth community here, right? That we're just at least opening the door in people's minds to the idea that the worst case scenario is possible. And then we could be channeling and kind of switchboarding a bunch of other really smart people who've been talking about this kind of stuff for a long time if people want to dive deeper on the various details, right? You talk to the libertarian crowd, they're all about end the Fed, right? You talk to the Code Pink lefties, they're all about these wars are a racket. You talk to certain other people, they're all about healthcare. So we want to have it be, this is kind of the big picture from every angle. Our government is fundamentally corrupt and fundamentally compromised, and it will never get better until we take it down democratically and create something new. But we're just trying to open that door, give them the big picture, and then allow all the other really smart people who've been talking about a lot of this stuff for a long time to kind of explain it in further detail should the need arise. And I think a lot of people will be interested. So,
yeah, and let's for people that don't understand the kind of effect of the Crown Corporation and how much of our lives are controlled by the Crown Corporation. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, of how that affects us, and how that's the crux of the issue?
well, it's just we have this idea in the United States that we're super tough and we just kicked these mean old Brits out and, we just won and that was that. It was settled, so on and so forth. And if you look in the British history books, they tell a completely different story. And kind of the idea is they've been trying to get us back for this whole time. They had
through legal means, through the bar, through those methods.
Yes, absolutely. So they start off. Phase one was we got away. We did the revolution, but then in 1783 they made this treaty where all of the shareholders, the existing British shareholders that held these rights to the land and the resources, could maintain those rights throughout this process. And the problem with that was, when the first colonists were coming over here, the East India Company, the Plymouth Company, the Virginia Company, all that stuff. It was such like a corporation that ruled the land, and I think they got some huge cut of the timber, of the silver, of the gold, all that stuff. So when those companies dissolved, those rights got transferred to shareholders, and then those shareholders had their rights reaffirmed by this Treaty of 1783. So right off the bat, we were in not a good spot. And a lot of people, if you look at the letters, were writing George Washington saying, hey, what is going on here? This is, we were trying to kick these people out and you just let them have it right back. Fast forward a little bit. We set up a national bank of the United States. And that national bank, is intended, I think for most people saw that as a well-intended thing, right? But over time, it ended up being bought up by straw buyers that were controlled by the Rothschilds. So essentially it got recaptured by the preeminent British oligarch of the day. And so they dissolved it in 1811. And that caused one of the big reasons for the War of 1812 was to come try to get that back. In addition to dissolving that, the people of the day, the governing body of the day, who had their eye on the ball, that this Rothschild guy is this British agent trying to capture us. They tried to do this original 13th Amendment of the Constitution. So the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, not the original 13th Amendment. The original 13th Amendment was focused on, it was called the Titles of Nobility. And essentially what it was, it said anybody who is a agent of the crown, directly, indirectly, anything like that, or anybody with any royal title, you are not allowed to participate in American government, categorically, period, end of story. So when the British came over in 1812, they burned our capital and they burned that document specifically to the ground.
And the significance of that, I just want to, sorry to interrupt here, but the significance of that is that esquires, basically lawyers, are considered titles of nobility, which essentially seems like there was some very smart people in government at that point that realized that giving unrestrained power to the bar and to essentially the practice of law was going to have negative consequences, which sounds like that's why they had that original 13th Amendment. Do you think that's correct?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a big part of the reason, because the bar, right, is headquartered in that aforementioned City of London jurisdiction. So it's this shadowy organization that controls the law that's headquartered in this place that there's not really any rules. So that was a bad idea. I think the other thing was at the time, the Rothschilds, they had got elevated to baron, right? The title of baron, which is a title of nobility as well. So bankers and lawyers, they were like GTFO with this new amendment, and that didn't get brought up. I think part of the reason was several of the founding fathers were also esquires themselves, so they would have been kind of like precluding themselves from participation there. But that was a sorely needed thing, and that never came back. And
what that would have done, frankly, is I don't know if it would have precluded those politicians from, being in office. We would have just have to come up with our own legal society that's not a monopoly controlled by the City of London, basically.
Yep, that's what we should have done. But that would have taken a lot of work, and for whatever reason, that didn't happen, unfortunately. The other thing that happened later on was they did that Organic Act, and they said that DC is its own city-state now. We're carbon copying the City of London format here in the United States. And they turned the United States into this corporation.
It's insane.
That
It's
still
insane. I mean,
exists to this very day.
the significance of this, I mean, I just want to break this down to the viewer, because we always wonder, why are things unjust? Why do we have a unjust legal system? Why is everything, there's an elite that, has justice. And then there's like the little people, 99% of us, that don't see that same justice. And people wonder, what's the root of that? And, the way you break it down here in terms of the effect of going through these legal channels to essentially create laws, codes, regulations that are diminishing our God-given and constitutional rights is where the crux of this all lies, basically.
Just ignoring our God-given constitutional rights at this point, right? Outright.
Basically, yeah. So, all right. So essentially, the bar City of London, they create this a new law, essentially, a new, what they call legal, by diminishing our rights. Could you tell us a little bit about that in terms of how they put all that into place?
Well, I just the simple answer is, they created a city-state that's not a state, right? It's not a state. It doesn't have this. It has a different type of government than what the Constitution originally prescribed. And based on that technicality of it not being a state, they just say, hey, we don't have to follow the Constitution in the same way, right? It's not the supreme law of land. It's more like a airy-fairy suggestion over here.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So take us through a little bit more of the Q and Tell Pro site, and what other, I guess, claims or facts you guys put out there in terms of the level of corruption and what that needs to be replaced with in the future.
So we talk about, as we mentioned, the Cabal, and the Cabal is this medieval royal bloodline that controls a lot of countries in Europe right now, and it's all one bloodline, all offshoots of Queen Victoria. All of this, it's House Coburg and Saxe-Gotha, dating all the way back to this original house called House Wettin. And the thing about this is it was the Holy Roman Empire based thing, right? So the Holy Roman Empire used to be what Germany, Northeast France, some of Poland, Italy, all that was called. And the Pope was essentially like the arbiter of all these little kingdoms here, right? So these royals and a lot of these bankers, like the Rothschilds, like the Schiffs, like the Warburgs, they all got their start wheeler and dealer in the Holy Roman Empire. And so they come to power, right? They capture this British throne. The British throne is run by Germans, not even by Brits. And they've just had this very ruthless modus operandi, and they see us all as not people, as more like animals. And so I'm trying to be more specific with the language. I hear the Cabal a lot. The Cabal.
Which, by the way, do you mind if I interrupt you real quick? When just for the viewer, when Austin is saying that they diminish your what you are as a man or woman, that's a literal thing. Where in their laws, don't they essentially state that we are chattel, or we are, people in the middle of the ocean under maritime law, so we don't even get to enjoy under their system basically the laws of the land?
Yep, that's how it works. So the British Empire, their power was sea-based, right? They weren't a sweet land power, but they controlled the ocean, right? So they wanted to get us into that maritime jurisdiction so that we're under the laws of commerce, of corporations, instead of the laws of people, right? So this is one of those things. They see themselves as like gardeners, and we are the plants, right? So they can just chop any of us, kill any of us, move any of us, right? They don't care. They see us as that low. And it's actually interesting. You see like Meghan Markle out there saying, oh, they're racist, they're this, they're that. But the thing behind the scenes they were saying when Harry was marrying Meghan, it wasn't about she was black. It wasn't like, ew, yuck, she's black. It's more like, ew, yuck, a commoner, right? So that's how they see the world. And they have, over the years, created this unkillable vampire system that is just holding us all in the Middle Ages. And a lot of people they're like, oh, that sweet old Queen Elizabeth, how could she be that evil? Or, oh, this dipshit Charles, like, he doesn't even know what's happening. Like, how is he masterminding this? And at this point, this particular last couple generations of royals, far less ruthless or calculated as their predecessors, but this legal authority and this system that they've set up is the basis for the rogue intelligence agencies and their super oligarchs that they're organized around to be just manipulating everything and doing all this crazy stuff to us.
Are there any other examples? I mean, we went over the JFK assassination. Are there any other examples where this kind of jurisdictional issue that they've created has, led to cover-ups, controversies, conspiracies?
Yeah, so they have assassinated many of our presidents. So Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, but John Wilkes Booth was recruited, trained, hired, paid by agents of the British Empire named George Sanders and John Surratt. One of them worked for the Hudson Bay Company, which is like the East India Company of Canada. And the other one worked for the London-based Confederate Secret Service, right? So the Confederacy altogether was this empire strategy of, if your colonies are getting out of hand, I call it chopped and screwed, you cause wars, civil wars, and you chop them into smaller pieces. So this happens this very day, right? Sudan, I think the guy in 2011, his name was Omar al-Bashir, and he wasn't playing ball with what we wanted to do. So they went and they stood up this civil war, this insurrection in the South, ran by this maniac his last name was Kiir, wore a cowboy hat. And they took all of the oil-rich section of Sudan and broke that off into South Sudan. So they do this in Africa all the time. They try to do it in the United States. But Lincoln, being like, he wasn't completely perfect. He did some things that maybe were bad precedents down the road in certain cases. But in this case of bringing the South back in as if they had never left, that was the right choice, because it would have been an empire victory otherwise. Later on, there's a guy, President Garfield. He was assassinated by a guy who was part of one of those weird, exotic experiment sex cults. And they said it was because he was disgruntled about some things, but he was an agent of the British Empire too. Later on, William McKinley was trying to essentially usurp or trying to degrade the British power over trade, right? They owned the oceans. They owned all the choke points. Suez Canal, Gibraltar, throughout the Caribbean, all of the key places. If you wanted to do business in the sea, which was how most of the trade had to go by the day, you had to go through the British and you had to pay them their cut and you had to follow their rules. So McKinley was trying to create this railroad system. He was working with the Russians. He was working with the Germans. He was working with some other people. And they wanted to create this railway system that would go through the Bering Strait and all the way to the southern tip of South America. So you could get from Western Europe to South America by rail. And that would have dramatically degraded this maritime power of the British Empire. He was also trying to do a gold standard. He was interfering with some of their empire building activities in South America. And so they sent this anarchist, quote unquote, to kill him. But that anarchist was a British asset. That anarchist was a part of this thing called the Emma Goldman Anarchist Networks. And over the years, they assassinated 6 monarchs, 3 prime ministers, a few presidents, right, all across the world. And that was these New York-based British banking oligarchs, right, like the Schiffs, the Warburgs, funding these criminal proxies. And then those criminal proxies being used as the people that were actually killing people. So back in the day, obviously, the forensics weren't as great. And, things were a lot more hardcore. So if you did figure it out, it was a lot easier to just come off you than it is now. But I think that precedent, right, of every president who's tried to get us out of this, or every president who's caused problems for the British Empire's designs, ends up dead as a doornail.
Wow, interesting. So let's talk solutions. I mean, we've seen our judicial ranks are highly corrupt. I personally blame it on the bar. It seems like you have similar sentiments about that. Our government's wholly corrupt. Washington, D.C. is apparently not even part of the United States. What's the solution here? What do we have to do in the future to fix this mess?
So we have to get around this system and get the democratic mandate to overthrow this government peacefully, of course. But the way we do that is we get out there and we mix it up with a lot of the disaffected factions of not just the right, but the left, of the center, of all the other exotic flavors out there. So essentially the plan we're laying out on our site is we got a bunch of groups here. So we got like the Jimmy Dore, Russell Brand, Joe Rogan left, right? That's one group. And that's a huge audience, right? They have a much bigger audience than the mainstream media at this point, probably 10 times the size. So that's a great crowd.
You call them left. It's interesting you call them. I mean, Jimmy Dore, I totally get, but Joe Rogan, I guess he says he's left, but seems like he agrees with a lot of conservative values.
Yeah, I think they were all lefties that started out as lefties, and they kind of realized like, whoa, this is not what I signed up for over time, right? So I think they're very amenable to this sort of a situation if it can be done in a careful way. Then we have the, anti-war crowd, right? They just want to stop these wars. We have the people that are the healthcare activists. We have the environmentalists. So a bunch of various people that see at this point, this government is not doing anything for you. We got the BLM and Antifa crowd, and some of the people on the right bristle at me when I say that, but I have a lot of luck when I talk to those guys. When you get out there and you're like, hey, I get it. The courts, the law enforcement system, it's messed up. But, defunding local police means you get all feds all the time. And I don't think that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. It seems like we
talk about
problems. Like we have similar problems, but the execution of I think you were also bringing up like how the left's always hated the FBI and the right now hates the FBI. So we should be seeing really eye to eye on getting rid of the FBI. But
absolutely. That's what you tell them. You're like, hey, hasn't the FBI been your guys' mortal enemy for like 50 years? Hey, guess what? You know who else was labeled a Russian agent and gone after by the FBI or the CIA? Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, right? So we can bridge this gap. I always tell them too, when we come to agree about a lot of things, like, yeah, we should take care of our cities instead of pissing away all our money on these wars. We should get rid of this FBI. We go on and on down the list, and they're in agreement in a lot of ways. They're like, just tell me one thing though. Like, I don't get it. Like, why did you like Donald Trump? All this other stuff makes a lot of sense, but what doesn't make sense is why would you want Donald Trump? Why did you support that in the first place? And I just tell him, look, I wanted a bankruptcy, right? I wanted this country to do a bankruptcy. And guess what? As you like to point out every other day, Donald Trump is the bankruptcy guy. He's the guy that is an expert at protecting the vast amounts of assets through nasty bankruptcy, right? So that was where my head was at. I wanted the Human Molotov cocktail candidate. I didn't want the nice, I never, and I think this is what we got to explain to a lot of these lefties too. I never saw him as like the messiah, the oracle, the person who just knows everything. I saw him as the blunt object that we needed to fight against the deep state. And in that regard, I tell him in that regard, I don't think he went far enough. I think if he started to do the JFK document declassification and they said no, that's what that Twitter was for, right? Get on that Twitter and be like, hey, I'm the president. I ordered this to be declassified. And these guys are saying, no, what the hell is going on, right? So then if they do try to come kill you, now it's a really dicey situation for them, right?
Yeah.
I wish you would have gone a little harder on that. I think having the whole media against him, including like half the Republican Party, all these whiners like Mitt Romney, those corrupt jerks like Mitt Romney. I think he got maybe a little intimidated, but he could have done a little better for us as far as the blunt object, Human Molotov cocktail, throwing it into the establishment goes. But yeah, I think a lot of these leftists, and you're like, listen, this country is fundamentally corrupt, and we're never going to have a better country until we do something about it. And you can say, nothing that we want do the Republicans ever do. Nothing that you want do the Democrats ever do, right?
Yeah,
so let's do something about this. Let's actually have agency for once. So we go to the left, we go to the various factions on the right that are disaffected, and we are trying to pick up some of these other exotic communities. Some of the, Arizona, Nevada, we got a lot of these various exotic communities here. And we like them because a lot of them are ideologically galvanized, I like to say. So if you're in the UFO disclosure community, which is millions strong, as you know full well in Nevada.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They don't care if the media calls them crazy, right? The media has always been calling them crazy. If you're part of the like hippie, spiritual, health, wellness, yoga, crystals, tarot cards, that sort of flavor of crowd, same thing. They are very countercultural and they are very unfazed by any kind of hate coming their way from the mainstream media. The crypto people, right? They're very decentralization minded, most of them. And they've been used to the mainstream media calling what they're doing stupid and fake for a long time. So naturopathic and holistic medicine is another one. Gamers, the sovereign, right? The sovereign and state national crowd, which
Mm-hmm.
is very conducive to this, United States corporation, bankruptcy, that kind of stuff. And we like the ravers
And
too.
apparently, by the way, I'm hearing rumors that they're up to 15 million strong now, which is like close to 5% of the population. I mean, that whole state national thing is blowing up like crazy, and it's funny because they all have the peace flag behind them, which we should talk about the significance of that,
Yep.
like what that all means and stuff.
That should be our new flag right there, right? Our current flag, again, I respect everyone who served or gave their life in service to our country. But I think where we get a little off the rails on the right sometimes is we get too focused on the symbol, right? The people didn't die for that flag. The people died for this country and for the people in this country and for the rights that this country represents. It wasn't necessarily just about the symbol. It was about the country. The other thing is that flag is the East India Company flag, right? It was the East India Company flag, just got changed a little bit. And that is, in my humble estimation, kind of a wink at us of like, you're not actually free. You're still kind of like this corporation owned by the crown. So
isn't it also a wartime flag? Like that's a flag that's to signify that we're in war, basically. Whereas this is a peace flag. I mean, isn't it that if you carry that or you have that flag outside your house, theoretically, you're letting the law know that we're in wartime, and hence, essentially, soldiers could come into your home basically and take it over, more or less, right? According to the law.
Yeah, I think back in the day that was the thing. I don't know if that's the law specifically anymore, but I do know like the gold fringe and stuff. That's like an indication of the admiralty law, right? So we just need a new brand, a new symbol that represents our new country. We want to make America quantum instead of keeping America medieval, and so we're trying to take the steps to do that. And I'm telling you guys, if we go collect these groups, if we collect those lefties I talked about, we collect the disaffected elements of the right, the traditionally Trump people, or maybe, the people that were the Make America Great Again. We collect some of these exotic other groups. That right there is the 75% we need to actually overthrow this government.
My question there is though, like when we're talking about the whole like thing of like the left and the right agreeing on a lot of topics, but the fact that we can't agree on Trump, I just don't see many other people that candidates that would be a wrecking ball and would go in there and dismantle the FBI. I literally haven't heard anybody else talk about that other than Donald Trump.
Yeah, and he just started talking about that lately. That was another one of my criticisms. So during the 2016 election, I was part of the WikiLeaks task force, essentially a giant group of anons, as they say. And we were cutting up these WikiLeaks emails and using these robots from this website called Fiverr, where you could just buy, 1,000 retweets, 1,000 likes, whatever, for like $5 from Click Farms in Eastern Europe and from India and cheap places. And we could essentially go around and as we know, based on how the elections have been going the last few cycles, for the national election, you can rig the national election by just rigging 6 counties in 6 states. So we were targeting those specific counties, and we were targeting key demographics in those counties. So like, say, Black people in Milwaukee, right? And we would go find the trending hashtags, because the Twitter algorithm at the time was much more natural, meaning whoever got the most likes or retweets would show up at the top of each hashtag. And we would go get not just the political ones, but the pop culture ones, the sports ones, all the ones that were really popular at the time. Stack those in these tweets with these really extremely racist things that Hillary Clinton said in her emails and blast that out there, right? So just get that all ranked at the top. And a lot of people, they're forgetting that Donald Trump in 2016 didn't win because he was so popular with everyone, right? A lot of Republicans didn't like him. He got less total votes than Mitt Romney, who lost to Obama. The reason that he was able to win was because like 20 million lefties who they weren't expecting didn't show up because they were like, oh, yuck. And Donald Trump at the time, the way he was talking, the way he was posturing was very anti-Bush, very anti-establishment, anti-wars, right? So they felt like, I don't like this guy, but, between El Chapo and Orange Kanye, maybe I'll let Orange Kanye have a try. So we, like, at the time, we were putting cheeky hashtags, extra ones, on our post that were just said hashtag not a Russian agent, because we could see in Hillary Clinton's emails that, hey, your lawyers have identified this deal you did with Uranium One, where you sold 20% of the United States uranium supply to Russia, as your biggest vulnerability. So what did they do? They made a plan. All right, we're going to put this Russia thing onto Trump. And they were lining that up in advance in their emails. And Donald Trump had that on day one. On day one, he had all the ammo he needed to unlock this Russiagate thing. And for some strange reason, he did not, right? He did not pardon WikiLeaks, or he didn't even bring him up again, really. Right. So that's where I was thinking, if you got that Twitter 80 million followers strong and they're coming after you with this BS, I would have told the FBI, listen, you will cut the shit immediately, or I will start dropping WikiLeaks every day until you do. And I will start declassifying things every single day until you do. So I'm not sure what the deal was there. I think he put Pompeo in as the CIA director, I think, because Pompeo, ironically enough, was one of the only people going hard in the paint for WikiLeaks in the first place. So I don't know if Pompeo was just posturing like that to try to trick Trump and get in there, or if he got flipped after the fact. But it was weird because Pompeo went from like vigorously promoting WikiLeaks during the election to vigorously trying to kill Julian Assange after the election. So, but that's the kind of thing, like, I agree with you. I don't see anybody more so than Donald Trump that's willing to take the establishment to task. I see people like Ron DeSantis, and I think it's good that he avoided these COVID lockdown nonsense and some of the other state level things. But that's a West Point guy. That's the Gitmo lawyer, right? He was the guy going and creating the pretext for them to torture people at Gitmo. So is he really going to be the guy that's going to take the deep state to task as hard as possible? I don't know.
I don't think so. I mean, just watching his actions in Florida, whenever it comes to challenging the bar's power, which there's been a lot of challenges in Florida, by the way, that's actually gone through the state legislature there. He vetoes those kind of bills. So he seems, in my opinion, to be an agent of the bar. That's not going to really change much there. Definitely not the stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, so we're in a tough spot, right? Because that was supposed to be Donny Boy's job, and he really kind of, for lack of a better term, he kind of got cucked in a lot of ways. So, if he figures it out, if he's down to ride, then maybe we'll give him another look. I'm willing to see what the landscape is at the time, because I agree with you. I don't see anybody out there that's willing to go harder after the establishment than Donald Trump. And hopefully, after all of this nonsense, after all of these BS investigations, after all of this hell that they've put him through, maybe he would be willing to finally take it to the FBI for once. But we'll see. We shall see. And I think in the meantime, we got to stop relying on people to come save us in the government, right? Because even if, as we saw Trump, you get in there, it's a frozen steering wheel, right? You're only so powerful. And if the ways you exercise your power, right, the thing that makes the president powerful is he controls the federal law enforcement, theoretically, controls federal law enforcement, controls the military, controls the intelligence services. Again, theoretically, but if your mechanisms of exercising power just give you the finger and do whatever they want, what are you going to do, right? Are you really the most powerful person in the world, or are you just driving with a frozen steering wheel?
There was reports today about how nuclear codes were being hidden, conversations were being hidden from Trump, which is, it sounds absolutely treasonous, but they were doing this guy, and there doesn't seem to be any repercussions for really disrespecting the office of the presidency, It's
outrageous what they get away with, especially in the military, right? The Pentagon just admitted again that, and this is what they'll admit publicly, so the real number is probably 10 times bigger. They're like, oh, well, we can't find $2 trillion. Sorry. And they just kind of shrug, and it's like, so what? So, and the Republicans in Congress, this is how weak they are. They were going to pass a thing that said, if you do this again, if you can't account for your money again in this ridiculous of a way, then you will have to give back 1% of your budget next year. Right? So It's like, oh man, don't do that. Right?
1%.
Not a very huge threat. And not even that could get passed because the Republicans are so weak-kneed when it comes to the military. And again, the rank and file soldiers, like, we respect their service. We appreciate them a whole lot. We would be in not a good place if we didn't have them. But these generals and these admirals, these are no longer soldiers. These are politicians. There is no rank advancement up to admiral. There is no rank advancement up to general. You have to go get appointed and approved politically to make that happen. So none of these guys are soldiers anymore. They turn into politicians. And they do this insanely corrupt stuff. What other kind of organization could you just say, oh, $2 trillion of your money is missing, investors? Whoops.
Wow.
Like, guess we'll get them next time. That's insane, right? And guess what? Right after it came out that $2 trillion of their money was missing, what did they do? They gave them another $50 billion in a raised budget. It's like, didn't we just end the war in Afghanistan? Right? Shouldn't this theoretically be cheaper for us now?
Where do you think that $2 trillion went, though? It had to go somewhere.
Waste, fraud, abuse, corruption, graft, black projects, the works,
black projects,
right?
Yeah.
Think about $2 trillion is way is enough to get everybody a piece, right? And what other organization would we let just continually poke us in the eye, continually steal our money, continually waste our resources and our lives overseas, and just keep getting away with it? And this is one of the things that I agree, like, in theory, with some of these lefties on, right? They're saying, oh, well, we wanted free college, and they said that would cost $50 billion a year. And you're like, oh, no, absolutely not. That's way too expensive. But then we can go give $50 billion extra dollars every single year to the military. Every single year they get that much more. Yeah. Right? We spend, as much as the next 10 countries combined on our military. We've given enough money to Ukraine this year. We've almost twice what Russia spends on its whole military budget in a year. We have given to Ukraine in the last 8 months. So it is absolutely preposterous. And I think this is one of the side, I come from the right. I grew up in the right. I just ran a Republican campaign, right? So, these are my people. But to my people, I say, we have to get over this reflexive reverence for military and law enforcement, right? We got to call balls and strikes. And it doesn't mean we don't support the rank and file people on the ground. It means, dude, if these people that run the most powerful organizations in the world keep thumbing their nose at us, keep poking us in the eye, keep wasting our money, keep getting a bunch of people killed, we can't just reflexively, every single time, just support that anymore. We got to get our heads out of our asses, and we got to call these guys out. And I think, for this Biden situation, that's actually probably going to help us get that done, right? Because you see this, they're celebrating the first tranny general over there. They made their military mascot dog like that BDSM costume. They're just be clowning themselves in a lot of ways now. So hopefully this will be a perfect opportunity for them to see when you disrespect those generals, and when you tell them to cut the shit, and when you say you're a bunch of crooks, that's not disrespecting the rank and file of the military, right? There is no underneath them. There is no room for disobedience, right? They don't get a choice for whether they obey or not, right? So we're not blaming all the good people in the military. We're blaming these corrupt pieces of shit who run the military and these
politicians.
Yes,
the political generals and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if we could get that under control, we would have so much more money to run our country, so much more money to actually fix infrastructure, to actually make things work again. That's one of our slogans here: make things work again. Yeah. And we think that part of our plan here is we don't want to ever allow them to get in this position in the future. And I think the way we do that is we don't build our government around bureaucrats. We build it around software, right? Software that shows, QuickBooks can do it. So can our government. It should be mostly a software thing with people helping facilitate instead of just a giant bureaucratic mess that, sometimes they use software here and there, but really they aren't using the software well because they can't tell where $2 trillion is, right? And that's not just the case in the military. That's the case across the board. And that's largely the reason why they want to introduce this government-controlled nightmare FedCoin to us, where they could surveil it or turn it off, right? They're like, we can never we just can't track our stuff, so we have to use this surveillance coin. It's like, no, we need to build our government on software. We could provide 3 times the services
like
for a quarter of the
you're
price.
talking about blockchain. You're talking about blockchain to keep a track of pretty much all transactions within government.
Yeah. I mean, it could be built on the blockchain. It'd be nice if it was decentralized, so it's unhackable. Like so that decentralized autonomous organization style, like DAOs. I don't know if you've seen that, where it's just it's a set process that runs no matter what. You can't just go in and change it willy-nilly. You have to have the consensus among the group to make any changes. And so I think that would help us stop getting hijacked. And I think that would help us track our money in a reasonable way. And I think we could then spend our money on reasonable things instead of this gigantic mess of bureaucracy. And a lot of people don't understand, like the richest people, the super oligarchs of the world, they don't care that it's a giant mess. They actually like that, right? Because they can bribe and lobby their way to the front of the line. And everybody else who's trying to compete with them, all the other up and comers, get just clogged up in this gigantic mess. So that's one of the we're big proponents of a software-based government, and that is the reason why.
Then and you also, there's 2 other things that stood out. Tell me if I'm missing anything here. You have the Internet Bill of Rights, and you also have this idea of moving the capital of the country to Kansas.
Yes, sir. So the Kansas thing. And I've talked to a lot of business leaders of Fortune 500 companies about this. So this isn't just some pie in the sky idea. We need to get our capital out of this City of London carbon copy military jurisdiction we call DC, right? That'll
literally change everything. That's
yes.
Like sorry to interrupt you, but that's like that's a foundation. Once you change that, the entire system completely changes at that point.
Yep, and it says, like, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. No exceptions. No sneaky loopholes. That's what it is. Kansas has a bunch of gigantic, has a huge open land space of cheap flat land, right? And I think nothing would send a more clear message to these corrupt dinosaurs running our country that, look, you guys are in charge of fixing this country. You're not in charge of fixing Ukraine. You're not in charge of fixing the Middle East. You're not in charge of fixing Europe. You are in charge of this country right here. And that is where you spend like 99% of your attention on, right? So we could build it. A lot of people are like, wait, what? That seems crazy. But if you look at Egypt, if you look at Indonesia, there's precedent for this. The Egyptians realized our current capital is 1,000 years old. It's super crowded. It's a gigantic mess. The infrastructure is difficult. So they are building a new capital city out in the middle of the Sahara, and they're making it exactly perfect for what they need. And everything's in one place, and it's going to work way better. In Indonesia, they realized Jakarta, this entire island is way too crowded. This entire island is sinking into the ocean right now. So we're going to go put it on a different island even. So there's precedent to this. And, it would make it so that this is our capital. This is our constitution. We have something that works, right? Right now, the offices are tiny. The signals kind of suck because it's all stone. We got all these Illuminati symbols everywhere. The air conditioning doesn't work well in the summer. When they go to present, like when they're presenting an idea or speaking on the floor, they have to print out these posters because they have nothing to present with, right?
Like they can't project it. They have no modern amenities to make it an argument.
Exactly. So I figure if you go to DC is already a bunch of museums anyways. Why don't we just add a few more and move our capital to somewhere that it's functional and make a venue that's actually a functional venue for a government? So that's the first thing. The other thing with the Internet Bill of Rights, this is another huge ace in the hole that we have here. And a lot of people talk about Internet Bill of Rights in the sense of, not allowing censorship, right? Our method to dealing with that would be, look, these social media companies are vital services that you can't really run a business. You can't really run a nonprofit, a political campaign. You can't do that without social media. Right. And as you guys saw on the Joe Gilbert campaign, like everything is just stacked against you in that. As we've been seeing in the Twitter files, everything is stacked against you on Twitter. Right. So that's election interference. That's rigging, market rigging, all the above. So we're saying the power company It's a legal principle. The power company cannot shut off your power because they don't like your opinions. It doesn't matter if you are the biggest piece of garbage in the entire world. It doesn't matter if you're from the KKK, if you're from the neo-Nazis, if you're from some of these murderous anarchist groups. It doesn't matter how terrible of a person you are. They can't shut off your power. The phone company, they can't shut off your phone because they don't like your opinions. It doesn't matter how terrible of a person you are. And that is because they're this thing called public utilities. And so we made a deal back in the day. Like a lot of power companies are the only power company in town. So it's like, hey, in exchange for this essentially monopoly rights that you have here, you have to abide by some rules. And one of those rules is you can't just shut people off because you feel like it, right? So that should be a hard set principle on the internet, just like it's a hard set principle in other arenas. And I think that would help things a lot. The next thing of the Internet Bill of Rights, the thing that is our ace in the hole here, the thing that's going to allow us to pull off this Andrew Yang-like spring out of the woodworks and get really popular really fast is our idea of data sovereignty and the great data clawback. So everywhere on the internet, everywhere you go, they are tracking your data, right? So every website you go to, even if you don't use Google, Facebook, or any of these giants, Google Analytics is in every single web page out there, right? And they can see every single keystroke you make. And they could even see, like, if you go to type something in on a website and you don't hit enter, they could see implied text is what that's called. They could track your locations every single place you go. They have tracking cookies that they could see what your behavior was versus what your buying habits are. And so they can essentially build these unimaginably complex psychological profiles on each and every one of us individually, and they can know what makes us sad, what makes us happy, what makes us motivated to take action one way or another. And they can use that to manipulate the crap out of us or sell that to other corporations so that they can manipulate the crap out of us into buying their stuff or doing their thing or pushing their cause or whatever. And it's not just your online behavior. It's not just on your phone and on your computer. Your phone listens in a lot of cases to your offline conversations, and it's this AI in your phone that transcribes it into text and then sends that text in, right? So they'll say, oh, we're not listening. It's like, yeah, that AI thing in my phone is listening and it's sending you the transcript, right? So that's the weasel words they use. Every single thing that passes through a tier 1 data center, emails, calls, all that stuff, that's tracked. When you go to the store, like especially in Arizona now, Walmart has these facial recognition cameras that track you every single place you walk through the store, every single thing you buy. The banks, they take your name off there, they give you a number, and they aggregate the data and give that all to these AI companies and these tech giants. The hospitals, they take all of your medical data and they give it over, they sell it. The DNA companies, they take all of your DNA and they sell it to big pharma, right? So everyone's getting rich off our data except us. And that data right now is worth trillions and trillions of dollars. And moving into the future, it's going to be exponentially more valuable, tens, potentially even hundreds of trillions of dollars. So what we're saying is that, look, if you want to cyberstalk the shit out of us and make trillions of dollars off our data, then you need to pay us our cut, right? We own the data. That data should go to a blockchain that we own. And every time that gets touched, whether that's by a corporation, by an AI, by a federal law enforcement, by whoever, we got to get paid our cut every single time. So this is essentially a path to eventually $1,000, $1,500 a month for every single person in the United States and potentially the world if they pick it up too. And so we're calling that our universal passive income. It differs from universal basic income in the fact that it's not just a handout from other taxpayers, which wouldn't be fair. Universal passive income is a fair business exchange that allows everybody to earn money off the value that they're generating for these tech titans that are taking over the world, right? And this data, it's becoming more and more valuable. It is the gas that every single AI company needs to use to function, right? These AI, if you want to train your AI, you need a mountain of data to have it learn, right? So in exchange for us allowing these robots to take over the world, they got to pay us our cut, right? Obviously, we can't really stop that stuff, but we can slow it down a little bit, and we can make it more expensive, and we can make it more fair as they gobble up more and more of every industry, right? We got these chat bots taking over customer service. We got these factory robots taking over a bunch of manufacturing jobs. In Arizona, we have these self-driving cars everywhere that right now I could pull up my phone. I could order a car without a driver and I could go somewhere in a car without a driver, right? So they're putting a bunch of drivers out of work. So what are we going to do in a society where in the next decade, there's going to be tens of millions of jobs? How are we going to manage that without just descending into Mad Max land? And how we're going to manage that is with this regime change, with this Internet Bill of Rights, and with this universal passive income that allows everybody to get by based on the value that they're providing.
Better than their solution. Their solution seems to be population control, killing large amounts of people from what their actions and their words that are coming out of certain European capitals. This is a brilliant idea. Is there anything that we missed in terms of Q Intel Pro?
Well, it's got a bunch of stuff. So we got I put in the rabbit hole section. We got the cabal. We got mind control stuff. We got satanic pedophiles, like where we got that from, which was the FBI website.
And by the way, I just want to reiterate to the viewer, this is like Austin has receipts for all of this stuff, right? Like it's not
absolutely.
Like you're just throwing these things out there. You're
so it's curations of government documents, essentially, and expert testimony from various people who have worked with this stuff. That's what this is, and it's meant to be a simple, well-documented, easy thing that it's mobile optimized. So as we're getting out there and as we're building this support and as we're bringing people like waking them up to the idea that the worst case scenario is possible, you got all the evidence you need right in your hand at all times, right? They don't believe that satanic pedophiles are a thing. You're like, hey, look, we got that FBI website. Here's the clip of them talking about what it is. Here's the clip of them doing tunnels to preschools. It works.
You're trying to demonstrate how horrible it is, hence this kind of call for drastic change.
Absolutely. So in the domestic side, we got the stuff about the Federal Reserve, and we call them the banksters, right? Just this financial tyranny that's captured our money system, and that has been enslaving us and devaluing our money for a long time. We have, I call it Bush League politics, and I should change it to gangster mafia politics because it's essentially just showing how, based on their emails, the Democrats and in some cases Republicans, they do a bunch of shady stuff. They hire people to go steal yard signs. They hire people to go vandalize. Like during the election in 2016, they went and hired a bunch of gangsters to vandalize vehicles that had Trump stickers on them to, quote, create a psychological climate unfavorable to such displays. We show how they rigged the polls, right? We had all their information in there. We show them like Jake Tapper and other liberal journalists that would never say this in public, emailing them behind the scenes and saying, like, why are you trying to intimidate us out of talking things that you don't like? We have them putting fake Craigslist ads. Like, so they would make ads that were supposedly from the Trump organization, and they would write a bunch of offensive things in there. This is approved by the head of communications from the Democratic Party. So it's not just like some low-level people doing this. And they would astroturf a bunch of offensive things that Trump supposedly did. We have them talking about wet works, right? Wet works, the euphemism for killing people. So again, it's straight from the camel's mouth, all there in a nice, easy to read format. So that was the Bush League politics section. We talk about the criminal injustice system. Talk about how the United States, out of all the world's prisoners, all the prisoners in the world, a quarter of them are in the United States. And we don't have anywhere close to the quarter of the population. We talk about how your constitutional right, they don't exist, right? 67% of the people in jail right now are unconvicted. So I provoked a lot of people on my side, on the Republican side at least, during the campaign. When John Fetterman said that I think half the people should get out of jail, I said I agree with that, and they were like, "What are you talking about?" And it's like 67% of the people in jail right now are not convicted, right? And we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, right? And so they're like, "Oh wait, yeah." So obviously some people, and this is the big game here, where they will let all these people that, you've robbed like 20 people, you've raped like 20 people, you have this like rap sheet, 100 pages long, and they're just going to let you out on the street. And then they're going to make everybody think, oh, we have to crack down more we have to be more draconian. We have to do this. And that's what I explained to some of these lefties I talked to is like, dude, George Soros, his aim is not getting people out of prison. His aim is manufacturing the consent to have a massive wave of people going back to prison because he makes a lot of money in the bond markets off of the bonds created when those people go to prison, right? So he pretends to be your friend, but he's actually doing exactly the opposite. And it's not that hard, right? It's not that hard to say, like, I went to prison over a YouTube video, right? And I had all my rights violated. It's not that hard to say, okay, this person that's never had a criminal record, that didn't do anything violent, that made a YouTube video, that we're doing this ticky-tacky stuff on, that's not a threat. Versus this person that raped, 10 women, robbed 6 people, right? It should not be that difficult to say who's a threat and who's not, especially with some of the high profile examples we've been seeing lately is people that clearly are off their rocker and clearly just commit violent crimes nonstop, they get let out. And then that kind of poisons the well and makes the rest of us limited government minded sort of folks think like, oh, we should just lock everyone up. It's like, no, dude, we should call balls and strikes and we should have constitutional rights. One of the very important updates that we need to make to our constitution is we need to specify explicitly innocent until proven guilty. A lot of people don't know because they teach us this in school as if that is in the Constitution. That's not, nowhere in the Constitution does it say innocent until proven guilty. Absolutely nowhere. And they act accordingly, right? Stuff like your right to a speedy trial. You're supposed to have 70 days from the time they indict you to the time you get a trial if you don't waive that right. And for my case and for all kinds of other people's cases, they just drag that out for years on end. So you end up sitting there for years and years in prison and they just say, oh, we could get unlimited delays and we'll just keep you in here forever unless you take our BS plea.
Yeah.
Right? That
I know
is
somebody
crazy.
in jail right now, actually, by the time he's going to even see trial, it's going to be 1.5 years in jail.
Yeah, that is insanity. And according to our Constitution, that's not supposed to be a thing. That is a bedrock, like one of the most fundamental constitutional rights that you have. So we need to take that and say, okay, right to a speedy trial. And if they do not give you right to a speedy trial, you get out, period, right? Cases dropped. There has to be some kind of penalties for these officials who just violate this stuff nonstop, right?
Exactly.
Our constitutional rights have to actually mean something. Because if they don't, then we don't actually live in the United States like we think we do. This is not America. If the Constitution isn't existing, our constitutional rights aren't existing, then we don't live actually in America like we think we do. And we want to get back to that. So that's criminal justice. We talk about the DC thing, right? I made that graphic where I have the DC out in the water and then how it's franchising its jurisdiction out to the circuit courts in the individual states. So we just talk about the giant racket the criminal justice system is, how it's the opposite of justice in almost every case. We talk about how the elections are rigged, obviously, and have been rigged for a long time. And we show, in a lot of cases, like clips from MSNBC of them, back when it was okay for liberals to question elections. We show WikiLeaks of how Google's openly interfering in the elections. We have a link on there. A lot of you guys remember that Sidney Powell made this accusation against these voting machine companies, saying that, they're owned by this web of shell companies out of Barbados, the Netherlands, and ultimately in Venezuela. All of those allegations that she got sued for, those were out of a CIA briefing sent classified to the embassies in Central America in as far back as 2006. So our government has known since 2006 those voting machine companies are BS. To the max.
So what she was saying was legitimate?
What she was essentially saying is directly, she didn't know it at the time, right? And I was trying to send it to her like, hey, you can't get sued if you're just reading off WikiLeaks, right? But on my site, I have that thing showing, look at how sketchy these voting machine companies are, right? This is a CIA assessment of these voting machine companies set classified to the thing. So I try to provide the sauce here for some of the concerns that we raised, the various concerns that we raised. I try to explain what happened with that Trump election in 2016, that they keep doing this Russia racket, because a lot of people are still really hopped up on that. And I think we should spend a little bit more time explaining to some of our hysterical liberal friends that this was all BS and you guys can take a breath now. So just trying to lay it all out here, right? Talking about the FBI. Talking about the FBI has always been a vicious gangster mafia. Talking about how J. Edgar Hoover since the 30s, right? He would blackmail politicians. He would work with the mafia, right? He was one of the most despicable human beings on earth. And that is the godfather. That is the founding father, essentially, of the FBI. So the FBI, they say, oh, it's just gotten corrupt lately. No, it's always been corrupt. It's always been terrible. They've always abused their counterintelligence responsibilities to just go after people they don't like politically since forever. So they have no legitimacy and they need to be gone. And that's kind of the case we're building on that page there. Black Ops 101. That's one of the things most people like one of the things that I'm most known for is just talking about that situation with the intelligence services and with the Crown and kind of where that all came from and where their use of outsourcing their intelligence operations to criminal proxies goes all the way back to the Pirates of the Caribbean, like in the 1600s. So MI6 started as Marine Intelligence Unit 6. And it was where they legalized a thing called privateering, which was piracy. And so Spain is over here in the Americas doing their thing, getting all the gold. England wants their peace, but they're not bad enough to mess with Spain. So they took ships flagged not by any country. So it just seems like this is a bunch of individuals doing this and not a country. And they would go attack those Spanish treasure ships and loot them. And that was kind of the origin of MI6 in the first place. And when there weren't Spanish treasure ships to attack, they created these pirate colonies in the Americas that got by on selling humans, slaves, and prostitutes, and heroin, like opium. So this human trafficking and drug dealing intertwinement with the intelligence services goes all the way back to the days of the Pirates of the Caribbean. And that's kind of the case I'm laying out there in that Black Ops 101 page. And it's still plaguing us to this day, right? A lot of people, they don't correlate the two. But if you notice, as Bush's 2 wars escalated to Obama's 7 wars, the opioid epidemic in the United States absolutely exploded. And those are independent things. Those are directly contingent upon each other, right? So that's what makes me popular with a lot of black people. Like, hey, wasn't the CIA doing this drug dealing racket in the inner cities, right? And you guys all crazy conspiracy theorists for that. And now we're saying that, and now you guys are calling us conspiracy theorists. So, hey, hasn't this been your thing for a long time? So make it people like that section. I talk about Libya, Syria, Ukraine. These are just a few examples of many, but they're ones that we have all kinds of documentation for. Like in Libya, they were openly giving weapons. And if you click on the links there, you could see in the classified CIA briefing, they're saying, oh, these people that are fighting Gaddafi that we're arming were the same people who we were fighting against in Iraq. And they're like, yep, but the media has no way to prove it. So whatever, who cares? We show how that Benghazi situation, right? And it's behind the Benghazi picture. It's a little hidden Easter egg in there. Talking about how they gave these sophisticated shoulder fire heat-seeking missiles that you could shoot planes and helicopters out of the sky. They gave thousands of them to these terror proxies that they wanted to fight Gaddafi, including Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda went and gave those around to terrorist groups all over Africa. So if you remember that Bring Back Our Girls, hashtag Bring Back Our Girls, right? Where those girls got kidnapped by those terrorists and it was this big, social media campaign. Those terrorists got their weapons from Al-Qaeda, who got their weapons from the State Department. So that's why they didn't want to go save Ambassador Stevens, is because if they would have gotten there, if they would have gone and done anything, then they would have to acknowledge that this guy's here tracking down all these weapons that we gave to a bunch of terrorists, right? That was the ridiculous part about it. Italy, the base in Italy, they could have scrambled air support for those guys. It would have been 45 minutes away in a fighter jet, right? If you scramble. And they left him there all night because they didn't want to acknowledge it. So that's in there. How they were arming these other groups, like the Bring Back Our Girls groups is in there. I talk about how we turned the most prosperous country in Africa into this backwards hellhole that now houses these open-air slave markets. Yeah. Where you could go buy a human being in Libya right now, like a person, not just for their time, but for their life. You can go buy a person for $200 to $300 in Libya.
And that never existed before.
Yeah, well, it wasn't happening under Gaddafi. Gaddafi was nowhere near the person that they're saying he was. In fact, when this was all going down, Gaddafi was trying to negotiate and essentially saying, I'll do whatever you want. I'll make whatever concessions you want. And they just ignored that and said, no, kill him anyways. We want to do this. Italian intelligence in there, I show, was warning, dude, hey, stop messing with Libya, because if you do, we're going to have this massive refugee crisis in Europe, and they ignored that too. So just like kind of the look behind the curtain at some of this war stuff, talking about in Syria, how they said, oh, we're going to go arm these moderate rebels. And it's like, LOL. So if Antifa was, shooting planes out of the sky and blowing up police cars with missiles, would we call them moderate rebels? Like, get out of here.
Yeah.
So Syria is one of the freest countries in the Middle East. They call it Bashar al-Assad, such a terrible dictator. Oh my God. But guess what? Syria is one of the only places where women could go outside without head coverings. Syria is one of the only places where people could smoke. Syria was one of the only places that people could go dance at nightclubs or drink alcohol, right? Syria is one of the freest countries in the Middle East if you actually look at, the comparisons there.
Yeah.
And under that pretext of, well, we got to get rid of this horrible dictator, they went and armed a gigantic terrorist army that stormed across Syria. Syria is got all kinds of ancient artifacts and historical sites, right? And these terrorists would just go blow all them up, right?
Yeah.
Temples in Palmyra, like Roman temples that had stood there for 2,000 years, survived everything in 2,000 years, all the wars, all the changes of hands. Those terrorists just went and blew them up, right? Sadistic stuff. And they were burning people alive. They were cutting people's heads off. And so if you look at that page, it is a little graphic. But the idea there is I'm trying not to sugarcoat this for you. I'm trying to show you, like, I hope you are disturbed by this page. I hope this makes you sick to your stomach. I hope that this makes you realize that this government is evil. Like, this is not hyperbole. This government is evil. And they are taking our money and wasting it. They are flooding our country in drugs. They are going and stirring up all the problems that they claim to be trying to fight around the world. And then get this, when those terrorists weren't winning fast enough, what did they do? They went and they took chemical weapons. They got the Saudis, KSA of Saudis, to do these staged chemical weapons attacks and essentially try to manufacture our consent to go to a full war there, right? So just preposterous on every level. And so I show, hey, here's the situations. And then later on, I put some videos on there of the in-depth analysis from both UN's weapons inspectors and from some other independent journalists of like how these chemical weapons attacks, there's zero chance that they happen how they said they did. And all of the evidence points to this was something coordinated by the United States coalition of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey.
Wow, insane. And they basically reduced that country to rubble to at one point, right? Now they're making a bit of a comeback. Or
there's troops, and this is one of my bones to pick with Trump too. Is like, dude, you said no. They said yes, and then you just kind of caved, right? So there's American boots on the ground to this day in Syria, and there's American troops in Syria occupying the oil-rich areas and essentially looting their oil right now to this day. And we have all these crazy sanctions on Syria, right? And who does that affect? When we sanction food, when we sanction all this stuff, is that getting Bashar al-Assad? Is that getting any of the oligarchs in Syria? No, that's just starving a bunch of poor people, right? Their country is already destroyed. Yeah, it's
like in
crazy.
Iraq in the 90s. Yeah.
Yep, and it's like so you guys went and killed in Iraq, for example, 1 million civilians, 1 million civilians killed by the United States, and you guys are talking about how these terrorists are so bad, right? Like how it's not even close. The carnage caused by the American deep state and our British allies does not even compare whatsoever to the carnage caused by these terrorists that we stood up in the first place. I talked about with the Ukraine situation. This is another thing where, Trump is at his frozen steering wheel over there, right? So Ukraine's popping off. They staged this stunt, right? They went to this place called Maidan. The CIA was provoking all these protests. And then they got some of those neo-Nazi guys to shoot rifles down at the crowd, and they killed like 100 people. And then the media all blamed it on the Russian-aligned president at the time, even though that was totally BS. So he gets ousted. We install our puppet, and this whole thing gets off to the races in 2014, right? People in the Donbass, like in the eastern part of Ukraine that Russia wants to take right now, they've been getting cluster bombed since 2014, right? There's been tens of thousands of people and cities reduced to rubble since 2014. This war didn't start in 2022. It started in 2014. And so it was all started by this sadistic stunt that they did. Then when the United States population and the president, Obama at the time, was reluctant to go to war, the CIA right? Remember that flight MH17?
Yeah.
Gets shot down over eastern Ukraine. So this is a passenger airline full of women and children and civilians. And the CIA tricks the Russia-aligned rebels into shooting that plane down by feeding a bunch of misinformation in there that's one of those fighter jets that was coming to bomb them, right? At the time, they had tons of fighter jets coming to bomb them. So they tricked them into shooting that down as if that was a fighter jet on purpose so that there would be mass carnage and so that the people in the United States would be down to go to war with Russia. This is the kind of stuff they do. And this is why we need to completely get rid of this system. With Trump, kind of where I was going earlier with that was Hunter Biden, right? He calls this out with Hunter Biden, right? Like this thing with Hunter Biden is absolutely preposterous. It stinks to the high heaven. You need to investigate or I'm not giving you your weapons. Then he has this impeachment charade. And I think a big part of the reason that he had this impeachment charade was because the Bidens and a lot of the politicians that we have, they go over to these foreign countries and they have these diplomatic visas, right? So that diplomatic visa means that none of the laws of that country apply to you, right? You have diplomatic immunity. Doesn't matter what you do. And so none of them could be prosecuted for any kind of corrupt things they do on that end. The only way they could potentially be prosecuted would be from our side. Since the FBI is so close to the CIA and MI6, if they're like, hey, stand down over here, which they do all the time, then they can essentially make it so these politicians can go do these rackets overseas and get them eyeballs deep in corruption so that we're forced to go to war, even when it's super unpopular. Like this Ukraine thing is super unpopular, no matter how much they try to astroturf it in the press, and they still send all this money over there anyways, because all of our politicians are eyeballs deep in that. So Trump, by saying, you must investigate this, Mr. Zelensky, now he's pushing on this diplomatic immunity thing, right? Now he's poking this nerve that is the facilitation of all the CIA rackets around the entire world. And so now the whole deep state mobilizes against him. And now they're trying to impeach him, right? Which it was good on him to do that in the first place. Definitely push on that nerve. But then he ends up essentially getting cucked into sending the weapons anyways, right? So he gets not only does it not get investigated, he gets impeached, and then he still gives them the weapons. So that's the kind of thing. It's like, come on, Trump, come on, buddy. And again, I'm not necessarily saying that anybody in those shoes, anyone else would have done better, but I'm saying, dude, Trump, you want to bang with the big boys. You knew what you were getting into, dude. And if you want to bang with the big boys, you got to bang on our behalf. Otherwise, what good are you? Right? So I don't, have any personal animus towards Trump. I just wish he would grow a pair and not, I wish you'd have used the power of that Twitter to bang on this stuff. Instead of fighting with like Joy Behar and Don Lemon and all these idiots on Twitter, why aren't you fighting with the deep state on Twitter, buddy?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so that was one of my bones to pick. Again, I was a huge Trump supporter, right? I was supported in both elections, but we can't just blindly follow people, right? We got to call balls and strikes here and criticize them when they're wrong and don't do that when they are. But back to this Ukraine thing. After we were giving them all those weapons, after we were arming all those neo-Nazis, which everybody in the alternative liberal press knew were neo-Nazis and was calling that out until Joe Biden got elected. In 2019, and this is on the site, the military crafted this strategy for how to overextend, unbalance, essentially screw with Russia in every way possible, right? And there was political things like causing protests, raising doubt about their elections, causing strikes, doing all this rabble-rousing politically, domestically for them. There was these intelligence things of where, okay, in order to mess with Russia, because Russia is supporting Assad in Syria, we're going to arm these terrorists even more. We're going to arm these Ukrainian people even more. We're just going to go cause even more of a ruckus around the world just to poke Russia in the eye. Then there was the weapons development wing of that, which was we're going to go spend a crap load of money that we don't have, building these new weapons, building tons of these new weapons, and positioning these weapons all around Russia, including nukes. And this is one of the things that never gets shown on the news, the fact that NATO, since the 90s, has creeped all the way up to Russia's border. And it's not just the fact that they're NATO, it's the fact that we go over there and our military holds these massive, massive military drills. Google or go on YouTube. Anybody who doesn't believe it, go on YouTube and look at this up. we have these massive military drills with Estonia, with Norway, with Finland, with all the NATO members on Russia's border. And these drills are essentially tens of thousands of our troops firing weapons, doing all this stuff, and simulating an attack on Russia right on their border.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So this just intentional antagonism is what we were doing, ramping that up extra hard in 2019. And ironically enough, in the report and in their emails, they say, hey, do this stuff, but do it at your own risk, because this is a very belligerent strategy. And if you don't do this carefully, this will definitely provoke a war with Russia. And so what do? They do it very ham-handedly. And sure enough, it provokes a war with Russia. And then we act like, oh, Russia is so evil for, defending their interests, right? How is what Russia wants to do with Ukraine any different from what France does to North Africa, right?
Yeah.
France owns most of North Africa. All 15 of the biggest North African countries are legally required to hold their gold reserves that back their currency in the French central bank. They're legally required to do business with French companies. And if they don't, and if anybody gets elected who does it, the French sends the Foreign Legion to go kill them or to go put that down by force. And I know this, guys who used to work for the Foreign Legion worked for me, and they would have all these kind of crazy stories about how, we had this bunch of kids we had to kill this one time, and it was just horrible, and I have really bad nightmares about it, and whatever. The UK, they still own Jamaica, for example. The commander-in-chief and the formal head of state of Jamaica, go Google this if you guys don't believe me, is the King of England. What is going on, right? So how is Russia wanting to have this, exert this influence on a country right next door to it? How is that worse than what Britain does all around the world, what France does in North Africa, what a lot of these guys do, right? So Russia's like, dude, this is in our interest. Ukraine, for most of its history, was a part of Russia, right? Mm-hmm. It used to be called Kievan Rus. When Russia was started, it was called Kievan Rus, and Kiev was part of Russia. So it's just completely preposterous. And the worst part, the absolute worst part about this whole thing, is that Vladimir Putin knew exactly what we were going to do. You know why? Because he had all of Hillary Clinton's emails, aka the person who oversees the State Department and has all of the CIA dirty doings in her emails. He has their entire playbook, and so does anybody with eyes, right? So they could pretend to us like that doesn't exist, but all of our enemies have our entire playbook, and that's why, from a foreign policy standpoint, we just get clowned on nonstop. It's because everybody knows exactly what we're going to do, and these dumb dinosaurs that run our country, they just never stop doing the same thing, right? So even if you don't think they're evil at all, at very least, you should acknowledge, we definitely need to do playbook here, because everybody is completely clowning on us, right? Russia stored up a bunch of precious metals, right, to keep their currency strong through this. Russia had back channels to all these other countries that when the United States was trying to pull this BS, a lot of countries are saying, you know what, screw those United States sanctions, screw the United States rules, screw SWIFT, which is the money transfer system that the United States uses to try to chop people off when they don't like them. Screw all this. We're just going to go join this trade bloc with Russia and China called BRICS, right? Even Germany, Italy, a bunch of European countries are starting to move this direction too. So it's not just evil what we're doing in Ukraine. It's not just ridiculous. It's such a case study in self-sabotage, right? Nothing has done more to diminish the American power around the world than this retarded nonsense in Ukraine, right? A lot of our trading partners are moving away from us into bed with China and Russia. Saudi Arabia is now selling China, the world's biggest buyer of oil. They're selling that in yuan, right? So for people who don't know, we have this thing called the petrodollar. And if you think about our dollar, it's based on nothing, kind of like cryptocurrency, right? So the more people that use it, the more valuable it gets. It's very arbitrary. And so back in the day, we did this thing where we shook everyone down and we're saying, hey, all of your oil, all of your international trade, you have to do it in dollars, right? So to artificially hold up the value of our money. Well, now with this Ukraine situation, a lot of these guys are saying, screw this. We're getting away from the dollar and we're doing our own thing now. So financially, militarily, diplomatically, this situation in Ukraine is objectively a disaster for the United States, to anybody with eyes and anybody with a brain. And it's nothing is accelerating the demise of our country faster than this singular thing that's happening in Ukraine.
Yeah, that all our corrupt politicians are cheering on and proudly supporting. It's insane. Yep. Well, Austin, did we not touch upon anything that we should touch upon, or did we cover most of the website?
I think we covered most of the website. I also have in there a resources section, just real quick. So one of them is WikiLeaks. Obviously, WikiLeaks is a big resource, and I try to show people like just have it be a quick, simple thing about all the insane stuff in WikiLeaks. A lot of people think, oh, that's just Hillary's emails or it's just George Bush stuff. But they dog out people from all over the world. Right as they were getting called Russian agents by the American government, they dogged out FSB, like the Russian intelligence services. They leaked a bunch of their stuff and dogged them out in a huge way too. The Turks, the Saudis, everybody gets dogged out by WikiLeaks. Great source of information. I show some other sources, just kind of like some other big document dumps there. One of which is the Panama Papers, which helped the people in Iceland enact a regime change in their country back in 2011. A grassroots kind of hacker and activist-led regime change in their country. Check that out if you guys haven't seen that.
That's awesome.
We have those informational resources. Then we have a bunch of really cool open source intelligence tools. So things for anonymity, like when social media is censoring you and you want to get around that, there's tools to get around that in there. There's
on the website too. That's awesome.
There's tools to bypass paywalls. There's a bunch of like data, like raw data resources in there. If you are part of the movement, if you're trying to help us change this country, there is a bunch of free photo editing tools. Like, so there's a free, like pretty much full version of Photoshop that's web-based and you don't have to pay for it in there. That works really well. Wow. There's one of those magic erasers where if you want to erase something out of a picture, but you don't want to erase the actual picture behind it, the AI can deduce what's there. There's one of those upscalers. So you know how in like CSI when they get a really grainy image and they're like enhance and it like grows and it like, so we have one of those in there. But it's essentially just a bunch of a great collection of free tools that we think that everybody should be using. And there's photo analysis tools in there. So in real time, as the Ukrainian government was putting out these BS pictures, we're using some of these photo analysis tools that we have on our website. People on the internet were able to say, look, this is photoshopped clearly, right? There's clear signs of it when you look at it under the right light, and we have the tools in there to do that. So there's video editing tools, right? If you want to make content, you don't have a green screen studio, there's a thing that you could sit anywhere and it can cut you out with AI.
This is all on the Q-Intel Pro site.
Yeah, it's on the OS intelligence tools. So we got that, and we got a bunch of other fun stuff. I call it the hacking tools section, and I have to disclaim because I've been to prison already that this is for educational purposes only. But essentially, there's a company called Kali that they make this version of Linux that is a collection of all the baddest fun toys and gadgets from across the internet. Wi-Fi sniffers, password attack, just anything you can think of, right? Hundreds of these things for every category. And they built it all into this really snazzy little operating system that you can install it on a USB drive and put it into any computer and boot to that USB drive. So you could use this thing using the resources of that computer, and then when you get up and you walk away, you pull the USB drive out and there's no trace of you ever being at that computer. So again, for educational purposes only, I need to specify. But check it out; it's some cool stuff. It's some fun toys. So we're trying. Awesome. We've been a part of the movement for a long time. We're doing this thing called the quantum movement, essentially a regime change operation in the United States. And this website is our attempt to be like have a more mainstream posture to show people that like, look, we're not just a bunch of tinfoil hat lunatics from the internet. We're actually like coming at you with some pretty hardcore facts there. And we use a bunch of fun tools and techniques to get that done. So check it out if you haven't had a chance. QIntel.pro and follow us on social media. And we're going to be doing a lot more great content over the next year or so, trying to ramp this thing up, trying to pull at Andrew Yang with our universal passive income with the Internet Bill of Rights and get a bunch of people who normally wouldn't be very amenable to our position on board. And working with awesome guys like these guys over here at America Happens, right? I have that right. These guys are awesome. Right, the whole crew. So my little crew in Arizona that worked on the Jordan Davison campaign and that works on the quantum movement here. We had a chance to get up there and hang out with some of these guys from this Vegas crew. And these are some awesome guys. Support what they're doing, follow their stuff. They're a bunch of really awesome people. Vem here probably knows more about this trust law and U.S. corporation stuff than I do. This is one smart cookie right here. So anybody who hasn't, tuned into this show regularly, check him out.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's how we connected, is like trying to figure out how to get us out of this mess, and the peace flag too. I mean, that's a big state national concept right there,
Yeah, we're trying to turn this into the symbol of the revolution here. Like whatever direction you're coming at this from, if you think this country is irredeemably corrupt, throw up this flag here, and that's how you're going to let us know.
Awesome.
But I want to say real quick before I go, I encourage everyone, after seeing this group, right? We have our group in Arizona, they have that group in Vegas. Get together with like-minded people from where you're at. Do shows, support candidates, like make it happen. And even if it's like 5 to 10 of you, like these guys in Vegas show just how awesome that model is, and how, you get a group of like-minded people, and we could take over each individual market in the United States, starting with Vegas and Arizona and branching out from there. And that's how we make this happen. Decentralized groups of patriots and truth seekers, moving and shaking, making stuff happen. So that huge fan. You guys, if you guys haven't subscribed to America Happens, check them out, support them. They're awesome.
Thank you. And you guys, what you guys are doing out there is amazing too. It's just great to have like patriots that actually care about the future of this country, and just like you said, like-minded people. We gotta, stick together, and it's all about getting this information out. I think as many podcasts as there are out there, I mean, we're combating a huge mainstream media apparatus. We need all of us out there pitching in and trying to get this information out.
Absolutely. And I encourage everyone to try to mix it up with people who we don't normally get along with, right? If we want to get to this 75% figure, we got to go collect all of the groups who have bones to pick with the government for whatever reason that is, right? And it's just got to be, we don't have to agree on everything, but it's just on this one thing, bankruptcy, constitutional convention, we need 75% of the people. So get out there and chop it up with people that you don't normally agree with. And I bet you'd be surprised how many of them also agree that this government, it needs to go.
And honestly, what you're doing, finding common ground, because a lot of us, we're in this kind of like right-leaning world. And I think what you're doing is fantastic, because like you broke it down with the FBI there. I mean, we have so many things in common with Democrats, and I think it's a matter of, we got to bring all that together. And, all of us have not liked the FBI for a very long time. And I think we got to find those common grounds and start cleaning the system out.
And we just got to talk to them and say, look, this has always been your thing. I came to your side on that issue and you ran away. What's up? Right? Just because you got so triggered by Trump, now you're on Team FBI. Is that really? Is that really?
That's a psychological operation. That's a psychological. They're so fearful that those people are going to wake up and be like, you know what? Trump's my best option because he wants to go in there with a wrecking ball, and I need that wrecking ball because there's a lot of government institutions that are so corrupted that they need to be wrecked. That's their fear. That's why they keep trying to divide us. That's why they brought up the race stuff. That's why they dug up all this nonsense that was like fading away just to kind of, get rid of that guy, because he is one of the biggest threats. He's the only guy that's talking about shutting down these, corrupt institutions. So, nobody else is saying it.
Yep. So hopefully we can be either pushing him to be a little bit more aggressive and giving him the air support that he needs and the public opinion that he needs to do that. Or we can have some other people get in the game who also want to wreck stuff. And there could be a competition for who can make this, who can slay this deep state the best.
No.
Right. But I think this, it's tough with our elections here, right? You saw in Arizona how that goes.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's very tough with our current election system. That's why we're pushing for this blockchain election insurrection. Wink, wink. And again, for all the FBI agents listening, I'm specifying that this is a exercise in democracy, not an actual insurrection. It's just a joke. But I think if we could bypass that and we could show everybody like just how many people in this country are down for that, that is the first step, building the mandate there. And then we can actually have a new country. We can make America quantum. And that's one of the vernaculars we like to use, especially with our left-wing friends, is a lot of them have been tricked into thinking that Make America Great Again was about taking America back to a certain point in time, when really it's about charging America into the future and leveling us up in a way that we've never been leveled up before.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So,
Austin, thank you so much for coming on Blood Money. Just a quick note for the viewers out there. If you want to go on to americahappens.com and shoot us your email address, we'll notify you on future episodes of all of our shows, including Blood Money, and we got a whole bunch of shows on there. Austin, we'd love to have you on some of our other shows, and, we got to keep this thing going.
sure thing. Just let me know.
Awesome, brother. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. This was produced by Studio 17. Here's our logo. And